Well, hello there. Kumusta po kayo? How are you? And thanks for tuning in to another edition of Paul de Guzman Presents Art. So I brought you here downtown Vancouver, which is of course built on the ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And we are gonna go inside this building over here, called the Dominion Building, go up to the third floor, have a look at Unit 17 Contemporary Art Gallery, and we're gonna go and experience the work of Derya Akay, who is a Turkish-Canadian artist. So Darius' work is an installation with some wall works, but his interest is actually in cooking, social enterprises, as well as just creating community within a society. So I hope you enjoy the tour, and let's go inside, okay? Okay, we're just outside 310, Suite 310 of the building. I'm just gonna go and open the door. And we're just going to go inside and have a look at the exhibition by Derya Akay. But before we do that, we're going to go and have a look and do a little pan of the show. So there's some wall works that you can see, and then also on the floor you're going to find some remnants of dried flowers as well as artificial ones. And what I'd like to do right now, because it's a really informative brochure that's being offered here, and what I'm going to go and do is read the first few paragraphs of the brochure as we go and pan the show. Where do we locate the contours of history? How do we trace its edges? Perhaps even more difficult to pin down is the shape of fleeting objects known as the story, the atomic particle that builds towards grand arch narratives that structure humanity's understanding of the self on a more meta level. Now it's very interesting to sort of like ruminate on that last part, which is understanding of the self on a more meta level. It almost feels like sort of like dealing with ourselves as individuals and then trying to sort of figure out how as individuals can we actually be part of a community or society. Now Derya Akay is actually Turkish Canadian, and because of that he's been doing a lot of work that tends to sort of like comment on his Turkish identity and culture. He still has family in Turkey. And I was told that he recently went back to Turkey because a loved one, I think a grandmother or great grandmother, had recently passed. It's kind of interesting and sad to hear that one of the main things that kind of brings us back to our country of origin is either marriage or death. You know, I mean, I have the same experience when I had to sort of go back to the Philippines when my father and my mother died. And this sense of community is also very important in terms of those types of things, building community. Now, the artist Derya had identified themselves as being an artist and a cook. And that's very important with sort of like disseminating the information or the contents of this exhibition. Because when you look at a lot of things with, let's say, cooking for people, you know, not only does it actually inform other people of your heritage in terms of the indigeneity of, let's say, food sources and things, but it also kind of gives you some sort of like connection with your own cultural background, with people who are actually understanding of where that culinary sort of like history lies, right? We're just gonna go and concentrate on this piece over here because there's a lot of things that were actually revealed to me during my conversations with various people in the gallery. Like for example, those sort of like pink cut out flowers. Apparently these are the same types of papers that are actually used to sort of wrap donaires and heroes and kebabs. when back in Turkey, so he brought them over from Turkey to sort of like use for this engagement. You'll also notice a lot of the wall works are really kind of makeshift community or bulletin boards, and that entire sense of the bulletin board tends to sort of like comment on community engagement, because cooking is in part kind of like a socially engaged sort of like system of generating interest in one's culture. You know, you cook together, you eat together, and a lot of cultures tend to sort of deal with that sensibility. I'm Southeast Asian, so I can understand that. Mediterranean people do that as well, but it's just a matter of connecting and having like a point of contact with regards to community involvement. This particular piece we're looking at right now is kind of interesting too, because it's actually almost kind of crafty in a way. And when I look at that, I tend to sort of like think that perhaps it was generated by perhaps a some sort of like a community event dealing with crafting with kids perhaps, or with seniors or something like that. You know, something that's just kind of like generative, not from an artistic or creative point of view, but really from a social endeavor, and sort of like looking at, let's say, a cultural contract between yourself and the community. There's also these pieces that are kind of like, they look like bedding, you know, they look like a mattress. It looks like a mattress. Well, we're just going to go in very closely, and I'm just going to read a description from the brochure in terms of what the materials are, because the materials are also very telling in terms of like a cultural background. This particular piece is called Shrouded, and it's foam core, cardboard, copper nails, cotton from Adana. Adana is a region in Turkey that was actually quite uh, historic in the sense of the Armenian massacre. I'll put some information down in the description below, so that you have a reference point. Construction paper, staples, paper flowers, muslin, and plywood in a cedar frame. And I was just kind of like ruminating on this, because a lot of the materials that are used, they almost seem to sort of like mimic some form of preservation or embalming. Now, I mentioned preservation because when you look at the floor, there's a lot of these dried flowers, and we're going to get to that a little bit later. But I just wanted to sort of like have a look at this sort of like sense of preservation of the body when it comes to sort of like embalming. Because traditionally, when you look at, let's say, the ancient sort of like form of embalming, especially when it stems from ancient Egypt, the practice is to actually sort of take all of the internal organs out, and then and sometimes you actually stuff the entire body with cotton. So the backing of this is actually made of cotton, which is actually harvested, or maybe it was from the region of Adana in Turkey. And there's also these wonderful little sort of spirally designs that kind of like is reminiscent of sort of like flowers, and the gauze-like material that's on top. It's almost like a gauze that you actually use for, let's say, dressing a wound or something like that in order to help it heal. And the flowers become significant as well, because if you've ever been to a Mediterranean place, like a Mediterranean supermarket or something like that, you're going to find lots of dried apricots, dried plums, dried fruits and nuts. So there's that tradition of drying things, but at the same time, flowers are actually sort of like the mainstay of the perfume industry. And all around, let's say, the Middle East, when you look at, let's say, a country like Egypt, who is pretty much responsible for 40 to 50% of the supply of dried jasmine flowers for the perfume industry, you tend to sort of like look at this as more of perhaps significant in the sense that it is actually a symbol for like how we as a society would like to sort of like remember our ancestors. Because I did mention before that Derya had to go back to Turkey to sort of like attend to the passing of a relative. And this entire sort of like piece over here is actually quite significant in that regard because it's a very personal bulletin board. We're just gonna go in and have a look. Like this one, for example, has almost like an advertising for a Donair. And it's funny because like when I was traveling in Germany many years ago, where there's a very large Turkish population, you would see these sort of like advertising everywhere, like a street corner, because the Turkish population in Germany is quite large, you know, due to the proximity of Europe and Turkey. And so Turkish culture is thriving in Germany, and so you see it being sort of like being part of the community there. It's a much larger sort of population than anywhere else. And this one is also interspersed with a lot of pictures of native fruits, some culinary sort of like dishes, some family photos as well. And it's kind of interesting as well because I wanted to sort of go into a more of a historical sort of like more of a historical diatribe with regards to cooking and sharing in terms of contemporary art. I was reading one time, I think my first recollection was with Gordon Matta Clark when he is an American artist. I'm going to put a little bit of a blurb down about Gordon Matta Clark. But he opened up this restaurant called Food in the Lower East Side in New York. And basically, you can go in there and sort of like have a decent meal for not much money. So that kind of like, for me, is one of the examples of a sort of like a community and socially engaged enterprise. And then you sort of like fast forward a few, maybe about a couple of decades, and you have Rikrit Tiravanich, who is a Thai artist who's pretty much famous for cooking Thai soups and Thai dishes like pad Thai and serving it to people who would like to sort of like have a taste. And then even here in Canada, you might even want to refer to a Montreal-based artist by the name of Massimo Guerrero, who is actually a practicing artist and socially engaged sort of like systems of trying to use food stuff for his social sculptures. You know, he would use them in performances, he would use them to sort of like cook meals for people. So there's that entire history of food, the culinary, and just cooking for people that tends to sort of like look at not just culture, not just about indigeneity in terms of food, but also as a community sort of like sharing event. Very much like what I described earlier with these, where these bulletin boards might be coming from in terms of like going to a community center and then reading, let's say, the community blogs, trying to see what's happening within the community and perhaps even sort of like sharing a meal with somebody or sharing crafts with somebody. So I think I'm just going to leave it at that for now, and I hope you enjoyed that tour. So just to recap, we are at Unit 17. I'm going to have the description, the press release, the times that the gallery is open, the address down in the description area. And please like this video if you enjoyed it. Also, feel free to share it on your social media channels if you wish. And most of all, if you wouldn't mind considering subscribing to the channel, it's all free for you to enjoy. And I want to thank you so much for joining me today on this tour of Derya's work here at Unit 17. Maraming salamat po sa inyo lahat. Thank you very much for being here with me. I hope you enjoy your day, and I hope art informs your life. Goodbye.